Hi. The first question is for Mr. Jefferson. Why was so much of the country mad at you for being a deist? Is that true? And then the second question is for anybody who wishes to answer it. Can you define natural law for the second question?
I will confine myself to the first question. Why was so much of the country angry at me for being a deist? Well, not so much of the country, but certain Presbyterian ministers in New England. I remember one pamphlet issued when I was standing for election in 1800 said that if Mr. Jefferson is elected President of the United States, we can expect, quote, dwellings in flames, female chastity violated, hoary heads bathed in blood, and children writhing on the pike. In short, a reign of terror. Instead, I lowered taxes. So there was a failure of understanding. My religious views are so private. I never divulged them. When I was asked repeatedly, I said, say nothing of my religion. A woman asked and would not give up. Finally, I said, Madam, I find I am a sect unto myself. She was not satisfied. I said, Madam, I am an apiarian. Like a bee, I flit from one religion to the next and suck out all the honey of each. She was not pleased. I'm a deist at heart. A deist is one who believes that the world is so orderly, so beautiful, so perfect in its Newtonian mechanics with centrifugal and centripetal force, the earth poised in the solar system in the one place that can support life. This is design. And where there is design, there must be a designer. Where there is a fabric, there must be a fabricator. So my God, if you wish to call him that, is a creator God, a kind of celestial Newtonian mechanic who has produced a perfect clock-like mechanism of a universe and wound it up. And now this God stands serenely by and lets this clock slowly unwind through the course of history, never interfering in your life or in mine. I do not frankly believe that Jesus was the Son of God, born in the womb of a virgin. I do not believe he suspended the Newtonian mechanics of the world at will. I do not believe he rose bodily to heaven on the third day. I do not believe in the inspiration of the Bible, in the Trinity, in the atonement, or original sin. But I do say that I'm a Christian in the best sense of the term. I believe that Jesus was the greatest man who ever lived, but only a man, and that his ethics, love God with all your heart and love thy neighbor as thyself, if we would follow just that within the comprehension of the merest child, goodness and even utopia would break forth all over the world. This view, which I tried desperately to keep to myself, annoyed some people.
Mr. Jenkinson.
Well, Thomas Jefferson is sort of everyone's favorite president, or many people's favorite president. In many regards, his reputation has come up and down over the course of the years, and it was in deep disarray between the Civil War and the New Deal. But it has been rising ever since, and it was appearing to be rising out of control. But suddenly, race has become, and we didn't even touch on race tonight, unfortunately, but race has become one of the big issues in American life, as it well should be. And Jefferson is emerging as we enter the 21st century as the poster child for the unresolved race issues of our experiment. Now, this is a bit unfair. 8 of the first 12 presidents were slaveholders, including Mr. Madison, including George Washington, etc. But Jefferson, of course, said all those wild things about equality, and that makes him more vulnerable to the attack. And then if you add the Sally Hemings question in to boot, a lot of race attention is moving Jefferson's way. And the question is, will it ultimately hurt Jefferson's reputation, or will it be another of the blips in his, generally speaking, very high regard in which he's held by the American people? My own view is that Jefferson's reputation is in trouble for two reasons as we enter the 21st century. First, I do think that the race question matters, and I think Jefferson is particularly weak on this question. The fact is, and there's no way around this, Jefferson was a racist. He was a scientific racist. He almost invented the genre of pseudo-scientific racist diatribe. And he was an apartheidist. Now, we don't want to judge the past by present standards, But Jefferson is extremely weak on this question, and he's going to suffer more. The old way of looking at Jefferson was Dumas Malone's way of saying he's a very great man, a Renaissance man, he did this and this and this, and of course he owned slaves, but it was a necessary evil and he made the best of it and was a reluctant slaveholder. I don't think that holds any longer. I think now we have to see race and slavery as inextricably woven into the very fabric of Jefferson's life and achievement, and that can't help but hurt him. But worse, I think, is the rising tide of national ignorance. Jefferson is our Renaissance man. And in order to appreciate him, you have to know something about his love of archaeology, his love of wine, his love of library classification, his love of paleontology, his love of architecture, his love of this and that. We don't know much about all of these things any longer. And so the matrix with which we attempt to absorb a great soul like Jefferson is shrinking. And therefore I think he's going to suffer and is going to be reduced into a kind of president, policy, race figure rather than the genius that he was. So I actually think that he was at the high water mark of his reputation about 10 years ago, and now it's going to be downhill for most of the next century.
At this point, I'd like to turn the program back over to Clay Jenkinson, our local host scholar, for a few concluding remarks.
Please sit. I won't take long, I promise. First of all, some of the proceeds from this evening's event will be used to purchase a significant book for the University of Nevada-Reno. The book, a translation of Cicero's Cato Major, one of the great Republican heroes, was printed and published by Benjamin Franklin in 1744. This book will be kept in the library's Special Collections Department. It was considered by Franklin to be his most distinguished printed production. It is bound in superb red morocco by Revere and Sons, one of England's finest bookbinders of the 19th century. So there's that. I just want to make a few thanks before we go. First of all, to Dan Tone, who did great service to help us with our media, to Marilyn Melton for work on the set, to Lynn Bremer for helping to conceive the idea, to Everett Elbers of the North Dakota Humanities Council, who conceived of the idea of scholars dressing like dead men and presenting lively discussions of ideas through historical characterization. You've all seen one man, one woman shows, but Ev Elbers, my dear friend from North Dakota, said, let's make it a humanities program. Let's make it historically interesting and accurate, too. To Moya Lear, who is my dear friend and a great contributor to the Thomas Jefferson Hour. If you haven't had a chance to listen to the Thomas Jefferson Hour lately, I urge you to do so. It's on every Monday night at 7. We have a new producer, my friend Tracy Panzarella, a world-class producer who's revolutionizing my world as much as Jefferson revolutionized ours. And so tune in if you can. And I want to thank Jack Fagley for making this evening possible, Michelle Basta for making it happen, and of course, Stephanie Kruse for making it great. Thank you, Stephanie. I had a long closing thought, but I will restrain myself in the name of time, but merely say this, that in 1790, two people in the American scene spoke of the future of this country in startlingly different terms. Crèvecoeur, the great French pastoralist, a friend of Jefferson, said, you know why we're going to make it as a nation, the United States? Because we represent every different language, every different ethnicity, every different religious tradition, every different politics. The nation is a melange of interesting and diverse elements, and that's the health of the New World. And about the same time, John Jay, who was one of the collaborators on the Federalist Papers, said, you know why we're going to make it as a nation? Because there's homogeneity here. We all speak the same language. We have the same English traditions. We come from the same English past. And because we share this common culture, this precious Anglo-American tradition, that's why we're going to be the greatest nation on earth. So as we think about democracy, as we move out of the 20th and into the 21st century and out of the second millennium and into the third, I leave it to all of you, Mr. Hamilton's rabble, to decide whether Crèvecoeur was right and we are entering an age to embrace diversity, or whether John Jay was right and we are in deep, deep danger as we move into the next century. Good night.